I want to welcome you to today's episode of the show. In this show, we always look at many things that require Islamic guidance, and specifically on Mondays, we look at Islam and science. So we have been looking at a number of topics that are to do with contemplation. We started on a series of topics that are to do with the miracles of the human body, just like it's displayed on your screen. So today we want to look at the human ear. The past two shows looked at the brain, the hardware and the software, the brain being the hardware and then the mind being the software. I hope those who missed out, you can check out the YouTube videos and redress yourself to the same. For now, we are going to look at the human ear as another important organ that we have on our bodies. Today, of course, is the 26th day of May 2025, corresponding to the 28th day of Dhul Qa'dah, the 11th month of the Islamic calendar. We hope that tomorrow confirmation should be made of the start of, that is after Maghrib tomorrow, of the start of the first 10 days of Dhul Hajj, plus the other sunnahs and the rituals that are associated with the same. But that will be for our spiritual leaders to give us the guidance. But as a Muslim on an individual level, kindly make the preparations that are expected of you so that you pass through those 10 days in the best way possible spiritually. So allow me now invite our guest, Mr. Hamza Sekalam, to say salam to us, and then we say how to start.
Our dear viewers, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving us life and for enabling us to be here.
Yes.
Contemplate and build our faith in Allah by understanding the various miracles that He has put for us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has instructed us that wafi anfusikum afala tubsirun. So He wants us to even look at ourselves. You don't need to look at complex systems like the universe or the wild animals or etc. Even just by studying ourselves, we should be able to get enough lessons to understand that one, we didn't create ourselves, two, there is a designer behind all this that we are seeing, and three, we need to worship that designer because he has given us the instruction. Okay. I created you, simply worship me, and that is all.
MashaAllah, thank you very much. So viewer, that is our guest. Of course, we've been with him for a number of times on the show. We hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues rewarding him for the sacrifice that he makes to prepare for us the content and also appear, because normally you trade off a lot to come and share information. We pray that Allah rewards you. So viewers, I want to start on a very interesting note. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran always makes the correlation between the I don't know, afida, is it the mind or the heart?
The thinking element within the heart.
With the heart. Sama'a wal absara wal afida. So if the thinking, I thought is a brain function, isn't it so?
Now it is interesting that within the body of the knowledge within the Sharia,
yes,
they consider the heart to be the thinking center.
MashaAllah. Oh, not the brain.
Not the brain, but it is easier to relate with our human developed systems. Because, for example, when you look at a computer, yes, usually you see that screen there and you think it's the one doing the work. But in actual sense, for it just shows you what is going on. The real business is in the processor.
The processor, yes.
Meaning, even for the human body, it is very possible that the scientists are seeing the brain as a center of activity, but it's just doing monitor work, and it's not actually the one doing all the work. But those ones are things that require far more research than that.
Okay, actually, I think there's also another verse in Surah Al-Hajj where Allah was saying He doesn't put a seal on the eyes, but rather it is the heart. So in other words,
meaning
And I think it is the spiritual heart, not even the physical heart.
That's the other issue.
The other issue.
When they think of the physical organs, yet in actual sense, it's also the software part.
Okay.
which is not necessarily
So
physical.
I think as we go along, you will give us the correlation between sam'a wal absar, the eyesight, then the hearing, and then the thinking function of the heart, like you said. But today we start on the ear. I think before you still go on, I think the ear, the throat and nose, they have a specialty in human medicine called the ENT. I don't know whether as we go along you'll try to make also a correlation among the three. But let's start with the ear.
With the ear.
Yes.
Now, the ear is a very important organ within the human body, because remember that a lot of things that affect us do come with sound. And the schematic that we can see on the screen is essentially an inner structure of how the ear is. Because we shall not go into the heavy Latin that is used in naming. For us, we just want the viewer to see that you have this external part which you have, which we tend to call the ear, but the organ itself extends into the head.
Into the head, yes.
So is the eardrum. The eardrum connects to the small bones, then the small bones now transfer to the cochlea, and then it goes to the brain. So it's important also to note for our viewers that this ear is not what hears. Even seeing, the eyes are not the ones that see. They are simply data collection tools. Once they collect the data, they send to the brain, and you only see after the brain has processed.
Yes.
So meaning even this ear is essentially a data collection tool for sound. It collects that data, organizes it into a form that is easier to interpret by the brain, then it sends the signal. And that is what happens. So meaning failure to hear can occur at multiple levels. You could find your eardrum is damaged, so in that case the channel is failing to transmit. So the rest, even if they are working fine, but the eardrum is not working, things simply don't work. Or you may find some of the bones are damaged, so anything that breaks within that chain ends up disabling the person's ability to hear. And when you cannot hear, you are really in a bit of a problem. Of course, human beings are very versatile. Those who cannot hear do communicate using non-sound based mechanism. You can use your hands, and it is a sign language, and you are able to communicate to those who understand. And I think for the majority of us here in Uganda, we don't really learn the language of
it's a specialty for very few people, I think.
Which I think is not very good, because so what if you are living with one who is deaf, and you are therefore also oblivious to dangers that can be had. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests us in different ways. He takes out that feature and he compensates it in other ways. And finally, the person will live for many years without necessarily having a major problem.
Okay.
So the ear is divided into three parts. It has that outer part, which we call the outer ear, the one that we usually see. And interestingly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates these organs, and he also uses them as a design. So it is one thing which I think human beings have also copied, because what is the minimum needed for a car to move and take people around? It's just very little, but you see we put there a lot of very beautiful designing, so that you have both beauty and functionality. So even here, the ear is out there. And there's an interesting fact that they mentioned about that outer one. Everyone has a totally different structure of that outer ear. And I
Not
think
even twins have similar.
Even twins, their ears are somehow different, because you see, the ear is designed to maximize the capture of sound around your head. So for as long as your head, the shape of your head is even different in a very small way, the ear is also adjusted. So in facial recognition and other automatic systems, they tend to also use the ear as part of the indicator, because the way it is designed will differ from one human being to another.
That's one of the amazing creations of Allah.
Then there is that middle part, because remember that outside here you are talking of just capturing raw sound. Then that sound moves through that tube you are seeing, and it reaches what we call the eardrum. The eardrum is a very thin membrane, and its job is simply to vibrate when the sound reaches it.
Oh, sure.
So that shaking that it does now taps those small bones that you are seeing in the middle. There is a hammer, anvil, and the others. So those small bones now shake in a very definite way.
Wow. And
their purpose is to increase the sound that is being transmitted.
Okay.
What we call amplification. Because had the sound been coming directly from our source and it goes for detection, we would hardly be hearing anything. But imagine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put just 3 small bones there, and they multiply the sound 22 times.
Allahu Akbar.
And they are very small bones. Because you can see when we human beings are trying to amplify sound, we tend to require really extremely large and complicated devices. The amplifiers are even sometimes even separate. A very large piece of electronic. The job is only one, amplify sound. But here, the amplification is done with just those small bones.
Small bones, yes.
And once those small bones have amplified the sound, they also need now to transmit it into the next level.
Next level, yes.
Once we are done with the initial transfer of sound, we now have to change that sound into another form, because the brain does not actually interpret things that are not in electrical signal format. Just like the way you see computers. Computers finally have to understand things in terms of 0 and 1. So meaning, if you are going to represent sound, you have to turn it into zeros and ones. Otherwise, the computer will not be able to understand it. If you are going to show light, you have to turn it into
on the screen is a video.
So that video shows us the progression, and you can see that the sound from outside taps that.
So this brown
is the eardrum. And you can see it simply shakes and shakes that small bone that is attached to it. The small bone transmits to the next one and the next one. Then the last one, as you can see, taps that cochlea, which is the last, that rotative tube there. So that is movement there is simply generating electrical signals on the basis of how the ear is. And there are even very specific measurements that Allah has put for each of those parts there. They are not just randomly put there.
Yes.
And those are some of the things that we base on and disagree with whoever comes and says, you see, human beings evolved from some other creatures. It is the complexities and the very tiny measurements that are needed for those organs to work. You can't say that it was originally rough.
It was an accident.
Then slowly by slowly it started improving. It's not possible. The precision needed for those small bones there to work and they create signals and finally signals which the brain, it is not something that you can create out of experience and say I'll keep on improving. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught us these things, and He wants us to appreciate that these are miracles. So the middle ear is the one that changes. It was originally sound, it has shaken a few bones, and finally those bones tap the last segment of the ear, which turns it into an electrical signal. And we have said that electrical signal is the only thing that the brain can interpret.
Yes.
And you are able to know that this is now a language, this is a dog barking. So that's what we are saying. For you, when a small child is born, it has no data for interpretation. That's why even when you make sound, the child does not seem to respond. It's not that the child is not hearing. The child is hearing, but the brain does not have any definition of that sound.
Yes.
So therefore, the brain, what it does is simply to keep building a knowledge base of these sounds and their meanings. For example, when a dog barks, you know very well that this is now danger.
Yes.
When a vehicle makes that horn there, you know that I need to get out of the way, and that's the whole idea. Or when a child cries, you know that I need to go and help it out. You don't run away.
Yes.
It would be the opposite. So that is the important part of the entire hearing process, meaning the data comes, granted it is turned into an electrical signal, but the brain now has to give you an interpretation that is a sound of someone walking, coming towards you, so stop. So that is the very important part. So you can see therefore that all these organs are collecting data and sending to that processing center that we agreed upon.
Wow.
As the brain and the mind as we saw it.
Yes, yes. Mashallah.
Then, lastly, of course, we have the inner ear. The inner ear. The inner ear also does another function which is very important. Balance. You know very well that when a human being is walking around, even if you turn your head and change your shape, you don't just collapse and fall like the way a log would be. A log can only stand upright in a certain position. You tap it, it will fall. But for the human being, even if you push them, you will see that they change their position of the body and they remain upright.
Upright, yes.
For other creatures like cats, again, their thing is in another world altogether. Even if you turn it upside down, it will very quickly right itself up and fall in an upright position. For human beings, you can confuse them and cause them to lose balance.
Okay.
So the ear also serves that purpose. Apart from hearing, it also helps us to balance and to walk in a way that does not cause us to fall. So even if our body position changes, people can even somersault. In order to make that movement of somersaulting, you should be able to know your position at any given time until when the somersault is completed and you are standing upright. And all these are very important parts of the ear. So those are the three parts. We have seen them and the schematic is very clear.
Okay.
We have said the outer one collects the sound, the middle one turns the sound into vibrations that are specific, then it also transmits to the last part, which now creates an electrical signal, takes to the brain, and the brain will give you a message. Please, that is Quran. The Imam has said Allah Akbar, now go to the next position. All those things rely on essentially a knowledge base that you build. The other interesting thing about our ears is the hearing range. Now you realize that there are creatures that are able to hear extremely well, well beyond we human beings. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has limited our hearing to a range that is common within our natural environments. So we don't need to hear extreme cases like a person moving 100 meters away. That's not part of our natural existence as human beings. The only thing I need to know is who is in the same room as me. So I don't need to know what is going on out there in the road. It is not of any relevance. Unless it makes a lot of loud sound, in that case I can hear it. Otherwise, imagine if you could hear things happening 100 meters away, there would be a lot of disturbance. Life would be very hard. But Allah has restricted and cut it off. Also on the higher side, we don't need extremely high sound capacity to hear. No, we don't need. So what happens in our common environments as human beings is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has enabled us to hear, and it is within 20 Hz up to 20,000 Hz. The Hz is the unit of measuring frequency. Of course, there are creatures like leopards, for example, that have extreme levels of hearing. There was a person that illustrated that.
Yes.
They were on a safari doing some films on leopards, because leopards are very elusive. You don't easily find them around because they are essentially ambush predators. They don't use brute force, so they have to hide and etc. So they were looking and observing a leopard, and the leopard, and it was night time essentially. Of course, the leopards can also see fairly well in the night.
The night, yes.
But this man now wants to take a notebook from his pocket, and they were a good distance away from the leopard. Something like maybe 200 meters or 100 meters or so. So he was moving a notebook from his pocket in order to note down something, because usually when you are observing, you may need to note the time and it is so that you can build a model of behavior. So when he pulled out his notebook, and they are not near the creature, they are very far off, he saw the leopard turning its head into the direction where he is. Imagine the sound made by a notebook. Even a human being cannot hear that sound. Just if I move,
Of
do not
course.
hear where I am. You cannot hear
You may
anything.
not hear anything, yes.
So the leopard made that abrupt movement, and he could clearly see that it is now pointing its ear in the direction of where he was.
Allahu Akbar.
Then I think after some time the leopard decided to run away from
Run
that
away.
position, meaning it was able to even
Detect
detect and conclude that this is a threat.
This is a threat, yes.
That is how far those animals can hear. But you can see that Allah will give a creature an ability to hear on the basis of its needs. The leopard has a lot of enemies and it does not have a lot of power to fight. So it
yes.
needs to be able to detect enemies and from a far distance and essentially disappear as an ambush predator. But for us, we don't need that kind of feature. We have other requirements, so we keep ourselves within that range. You know very well that bats also generate sound when they are moving, but you don't hear it because it is above the frequency of interest. So we don't hear them, yet they are actually making a lot of sound, and it helps them in moving.
Okay, so as we prepare to go in for the break, is there any other interesting feature?
So we can conclude with the one of cleaning mechanism. You know that the ear is essentially open. So you would think that things keep going in there and we have a very big problem. So the ear has a self-cleaning mechanism. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put there wax. Now that wax does two things. One, it captures things like dust. Then it also captures microbes, bacteria and other things that would go in there and create a lot of chaos. The wax traps it. Then you would think, okay, the wax has trapped, but now what happens next? What moves the wax out?
Yes.
Allah has also designed a hair system that keeps moving that wax. Once it accumulates that dust and etc., slowly by slowly it moves out until it reaches the external and you can be able to remove it.
Yes.
So there is no need for what people deceive themselves with, trying to clean manually. You know those those small
cotton
whatever. Those things are totally unnecessary. You can even damage your ear because you don't know how far you are supposed to push in. Yet your ear already has a mechanism that works. And remember that if you are manually removing the wax, you don't even know the optimal amount of wax needed to be there to serve its purpose. For you are worried about the ear being so-called clean and you are damaging the process. So leave the ear, it will remove the dust and other things by itself and bring you enough wax for you to simply remove it from here. You don't need to keep poking inside there.
But when you say that, I also now observe something interesting. I don't know how many people pay attention to cleaning this outer part of the ear. Whenever I go for shower, you see them washing their head and
you forget that the
ears also. But you hardly see that somebody's ear is so dirty that they have taken days without washing it.
It does not have a lot of corners that would require intentional cleaning. But of course there is some good thing. The outer part of the ear does not have a lot of impact on our ability to hear. So even if you have not watched it, I don't think it has a lot of ways in which it will influence how good you are at hearing. So these are all things that Allah has put on the ear, and each of them serves a purpose. Even just the shape,
yes,
the way this ear is organized, it is all for purposes of collecting all this sound data and allowing you to hear it. And remember, Allah has designed these things in an interesting way. They are two, they are in pairs. So you have the ear this side and this one this side, and both of them are doing exactly the same thing, but the brain has to merge the two signals and ensure that you are able to get one uniform outcome.
So there are cases where you see somebody is having, I could say Quran here, and then is attending a lecture this side. Is that?
Okay, the brain is designed to, the brain can only do one thing at a time.
Yes.
But it can do what we call context switching, meaning it can switch between tasks very fast. So you can therefore be able to do actually both. For you think you are doing both, but in actual sense, at a given moment, the brain is doing one of them, but it is switching between them at a very fast rate, in that you are able to know that the surah being recited is this one, and you are able to also hear the lecturer saying whatever he's saying, but it's the brain vibrating between these two tasks. And it's not even a healthy way of work, you don't concentrate, and
but it is also with our sheikhs of Quran. I can have about 10 learners there,
and he's able to distinguish between this one making a mistake, and it is about getting used. The brain has a lot of capacity, and for as long as you can pinpoint the individual voice, then in that case he does not listen to everything. He listens for errors only. So that's why you see him only castigating the one that makes mistakes. It's an intelligent way of managing.
So the brain is like set to determine on the errors and
otherwise, if you listen very clearly to one person, you can't listen to another one. So it becomes hard.
Thank you very much. Dear viewer, we are looking at Islam and science, and of course in the last few days of episodes we've been looking at miracles of the human body. Today we are looking at the ear. Inshallah, we are going to be taking a short break, after which we shall be returning to conclude the discussion.
Eno ye Salam TV.
Wangula school fees wa mwaka mulamba. Kyoli nokola sasura fees zo mwana wongo kozesa mumu. Nyiga kamunyenye emu mukaga 5 kamunyenye munana noti akadala. Londa ko namba 2 school pay. Londa ko namba emu okusasura fees. Teka mwe namba y'omwana wo okwosasulira fees n'omuwendo gwa sente zoyagala okusasula bw'omaliriza teka mu pin code yo. Aha, awujja kuba oyingidde butereevu mu kalulu k'okuwangula fees za mwaka mulamba.
Your content, your kids are back from the holiday, but it's not so good. Just turning there. DSTV kwanjulira ka wiki akabuli omu kati osobola okusasula DSTV buli wiki n'onyumirwa shows zo ezisinga okukyamula okumala ennaku 7 ku nnusu 15 zokka. Mwattu obinyumirwa wonna weoyagalidde. DSTV ensibuko y'ebisanyusa. DSTV Uganda erungamizibwa ekitongole ki Uganda Communications Commission.
I'm one of the scientists now doing research on plastic technology recycling, where we can be able to produce other products from plastic waste. For example, we are trying to develop a plastic tile with sand plastic tile, that it is unbreakable, it can be shifted from one roof to another. So this is a project we are working on. It's our initiative as Kazire Group of trying to reduce waste from the environment. Brothers and sisters, taso butonde for a better Uganda.
This message is brought to you by National Environment Management Authority, Kampala Capital City Authority, Vivo Energy, Airco, Pepsi, Stanbic Bank and NBS TV.
Byolina okukola obeere steady. Kozesa pin enzibu okujengirira kikalubirire abafere. Weewale pin ennyangu okuteeba okugeza M234 421 oba 2468. N'ekisumuluzo ekiggula essimu yo londa kizibu ddala osobola okutabula ennyukuta ennamba n'obubonero.
In partnership with Uganda Communications Commission, Equity Bank, Momo, United Media, MTN and NBS.
Okulinyisa omutindo gwa Afromobile. Eno yengeri joyinza okuzza obujja omutindo gwa Afromobile yo. Funa app ya Afromobile okuva ku mukutu gwa Google Store oba App Store oba ku mutimbagano gwa www.afromobile.com. Londako forgotten password. Tekamu account yo eya Afromobile oze bujja pin code yo. Ojja kufuna obubaka ku email yo okuli ne code empya. Bw'oteekamu code eyo olwo pin yo empya ekkirizibwe. Afromobile emboozi za Africa ezannamaddala.
Afro. Eno ye Salam TV.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Dear viewer of Salam TV, we continue appreciating you so much for always watching our favorite show, the Alhidaayah show. We look at the Islamic guidance and try to get lessons and from an Islamic perspective of the different scientific aspects that we always interact with. So of late we are looking at the human body, and we want you to remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا that Allah has so many things that you can contemplate upon to appreciate His power, and the fact that He should be the one worshipped in the true sense. So we have looked at the ear in the first part of the show, and we hope that the discussion you are following it very well. So in the second part we want to look at a disorder that is associated normally with the ears, and that is what we call deafness. When somebody doesn't hear, they communicate by signs and other ways, like our guest has mentioned. So I want our guest to help us understand deafness. Can someone be born deaf as a natural condition, and then is there also the human cause of it?
Deafness.
Okay,
just a few very quick facts before we go into deafness. One is that the brain is able to process sound signals very fast, so up to 0.05 seconds. Blinking is 0.1 second, so half of blinking is what it takes the brain to pick the signal and tell you this is now a dog barking, this is someone, a bullet coming towards you. So that's how fast it is. Then the other interesting thing is that the brain has what we call voice cancellation. You realize that when we are buying earphones, there are earphones that are extremely expensive, and they scare you with a feature called noise cancellation. So noise cancellation means I have a variety of sounds, but I only want a particular one. So the brain also has its own natural voice cancellation. For example, you could be sitting in a class and outside there's someone making noise, but you are still able to focus on the teacher and what he's saying, because you intentionally decide to ignore the other sounds and you listen to one particular sound. So that noise cancellation is very important. Then lastly, the ears do not sleep. They remain working. That's why a person can call you, hey Muhammad, and you wake up. Otherwise, if the ears didn't remain active, you'd require a touch in order to wake up. Otherwise, just a simple sound or just a person walking around can still be able to wake you up.
Some people who are professional
they sleep. In that case, the problem is not with the ears. The problem with the brain, the way it sinks too deep when the person is sleeping. Okay, so we now switch to the opposite of hearing, meaning this hearing is a ni'mah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you, and He can decide to remove it from you. The removal can occur due to natural causes, it can occur due to causes that are human in nature. So we can look at a few of them so that we understand that that ear you are seeing is not just some generic thing that you can work without. It is really something that requires a lot of taking care of.
So even at birth someone can be born deaf?
Exactly. So let's look at some of the causes. The first cause, which is common, is related with age. As you grow older, those hairs that help us in turning the sound, the vibration into an electrical signal, they keep wearing down, like any physical surface. So as you age, the hairs keep wearing down until the time comes when they are no longer able to help you to hear. So in that case, it means there has been a downgrade in just one part of the ear system, and it has degraded the service. Because remember, we have said Allah has created these organs with a heavy precision. Tiny devices, and anything that occurs to them simply damages the hearing service. So in that case, when a person grows older, you may find they require you to repeat what you are saying, or you have to say it loudly. The reason simply being that the hair are now not as active as they were before, so this person now has to rely on a higher frequency of sound in order to be able to hear. So the common solutions for those kinds of cases is hearing aids. You simply put something into the ear and it increases or it amplifies the sound. So instead of you manually shouting at the person you are talking to, you simply talk at whatever level you want to talk, and the hearing aid will amplify. Then the ear would appear to be working normally, but in actual sense it is working with a sound that has been upgraded a bit. So technically the person is now hearing more of noise, but that is what they can now be able to hear because there has been a downgrade. So age, وَمَنْ نُعَمِّرُهُ نُنَقِّسْهُ فِي الْخَلْقِ. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you old age, He also decreases on your capacity on your body's function, so it is downgraded. But this is not the same thing for children. Remember, we said the children, their hair is fine, but the problem is they don't understand what they are hearing. That's why they don't respond. Otherwise, for them, they have perfect hearing, but it is an interpretation issue that now causes problems. So that's the first cause. You've become old, you will definitely have a loss in your hearing. The other cause is earwax blockage. Remember, we warned the people against unnecessarily poking their ears, claiming to be removing wax. But in case you again leave the wax to accumulate, because the wax keeps moving out and you're supposed to remove it just in a simple way. So if you leave it too much there, it now becomes more of a blockage. So that one can be another cause of hearing loss, meaning you are no longer able to hear well just because of that. The other loss, of course, in case you are having wax blockage, you now need professional help. Don't just grab something and begin poking your ear, because remember that as you push your wax inside, you are again pushing it against the eardrum, so you don't have the equipment that is needed to pull out without necessarily injuring the eardrum. So don't do self troubleshooting on your ears. You'll end up worsening the situation and possibly needing even some operations. Then the other thing that causes us to lose our hearing ability is living in areas that have a lot of noise. There are places where you pass in Kampala and people are selling sound devices. I don't know why they think that the sound device should be advertised by extremely loud and permanent
loud bass
noise.
Sound.
So you pass around and you is passing, you are already feeling disoriented.
You even feel the vibration
but
on the
there
ground.
are people seated there the entire day. Now those people who sit there, for them they think that they have gotten used, but in actual sense the ears have become damaged. Because the ear is not designed for that very clear sound there. It is designed for a lot less sound. However, if you subject your ear to prolonged, extremely noisy environments, the other hairs that we're talking of, they wear out faster. Because for the old person, they're wearing out just out of long usage. Person is 90, 100 years. Of course, they have used them a long time. But in case you are using them wrongly, like subjecting them to extremely high decibels of sound, then you damage them. So in that case, if you have gotten used to sitting in that place that has that loudspeaker, when you go to a natural environment where there's not, you will no longer be hearing, because you have conditioned your ears to now hear extremely loud sounds, and it is not something healthy at all. There's no reason to permanently make a lot of loud sound just to test. In case a person is selling sound equipment, simply put low sound. Then in case a person comes to buy, you test a bit for them. 1 second, 2 seconds, you put back, and the person
that you might know is that a sign of development of a city or town is where there is free entertainment on the streets.
The entertainment is not to damage your ears with a lot of noise.
So you find every street you go by, there's you have a very loud sound that is playing. Either it's advertising something.
Of course, there's also that method of advertising where people sit on some vehicle, then they have all these extremely loud voices and they keep on moving around. For them, they think they are working, but in the end, they are damaging their ears, and it's not something that we should say is good. So one, in case you actually live in that kind of environment, you may need to put some things into your ears,
yes.
like some simple ear plugs, so that even if the outside is very noisy, the ear has been made not to hear all the noise, so you will not damage your ear. Otherwise, you can very easily end up even requiring a hearing aid. In case you have been in a very noisy environment and you've damaged your hairs within the ear, then you'll end up again now requiring something to amplify the normal sound before you can hear it. And all these are just human-made mistakes that cause problems.
Okay.
The other cause that could easily disable your capacity to hear is an infection. You can either have a bacterial infection or a viral infection that causes fluid to build up within the ear.
Okay.
So in that case, you end up unable to hear, because remember, the ear is working simply by transmitting sound around. So anything that interferes with the way sound is moving will cause a problem. So the common solution for that, in case you have an infection that is bacterial or whatever the case may be, you essentially use antibiotics to deal with that bacteria.
Well, on the advice of a specialist.
We didn't say you just go and ask.
Example, go to the clinics or pharmacies. Do you have something for my ear? It's okay. Use
interestingly, because the pharmacy person is a shopkeeper, they will give you what you want. They don't want to lose money. You have brought yourself to their pharmacy, so they won't tell you, no self-medication. Some try to be professional, but as Ugandans, the way we love money, you simply say, you got to use this.
Actually, I've never seen any pharmacist send you away. Do you have a referral from a doctor?
The most professional one will ask for the referral. He tells you, where is the referral? Then you say, I don't have. Yeah, he gives you. So infections can enter into your ear and cause chaos. In case it is extreme, then in that case you may need now surgery. So a surgeon has to go in there, and I think those are the ENT people.
Okay.
To now go in and ensure that they remove the infection, as it were. There are also some genetical causes of hearing loss, meaning you may inherit a mutation from the parent.
Yes.
So in that case, therefore, you have some deformity within either the bones in the ear or any part, and it has been carried from one generation to another.
Yes.
So in that case, you end up requiring sometimes what they call cochlear implants. So they simply have to put an artificially built machine into the ear in order for it to try and help out. But of course, in case you are not able to hear at all, then you switch to non-sound based communication. So you learn sign language and you are able to move forward.
Maybe at that level, before we go on, I earlier wanted you to help us understand. Can a parent detect at an earlier stage, maybe at birth or through infancy, that my kid could be having issues, and then they can go into the family history?
Yeah, I don't think you can see it at birth, because that one requires now specialized equipment which are not there in people's homes. But I do believe that especially if a parent has produced more than one child, they may be able to see an anomaly that the child is not responding to sounds after a long period of growth. Because we expect that the child should begin to detect sounds even a few weeks after they are born, because in that case the brain has built some small knowledge base that tells it that that sound, you need to look this side, that's where it's coming from. It may not know what to do after the sound, but at least it will know that the sound came from this side or from this side. So when you see the child is not responsive to sound well into a month or etc., in that case you may need to see a doctor. Of course, the final diagnosis has to be done by a trained professional. People specialize in these organs and they become primarily their preoccupations. So you don't think that you can diagnose by yourself, but you can have a suspicion, then you go to have it confirmed.
Before we also go further, there was some time back we were having a discussion on we call it what? Subhanallah, as people go into the marriage, there's that courtship season. So can this man, this lady, based on family history of deafness as one of the factors to either go into this relationship or not?
Meaning you investigate the family for deafness?
I
think you may be radical in that case, because my imagination is that you simply assess this individual that is in front of you and see if they are,
because we are told somebody should have a clarity of information as to what are some of those things that may later turn out to be spoilers. Yes, the spoilers of the marriage. Say, for us in our family, we don't have deaf people. How come I'm producing a deaf child? And that could be reason for people to even separate.
Yeah, because now remember the causes are variable. Yes. A disease can easily cause deafness. So in that case, it means you are not talking of something hereditary. And the entire cases are extreme and they are few. The majority are either an illness has caused damage to the ear, or the human being has poked the ear and damaged it, or a disease has caused the damage.
Okay.
So in that case, you may not easily be able to detect
that. Okay.
Then there are also other causes like drugs. There are some certain kinds of drugs like chemotherapy agents that are used to treat cancer by chemicals. They tend to cause a lot of changes in the body, and they sometimes cause a degrading in the capacity of the person to hear. But of course the medics do balance between now you having your ears but you've been killed by cancer, and having some damage to the ear but at least the cancer has gone. So I think they do a trade-off and they accept, okay, let's lose like 20% hearing, but the person will survive the chemotherapy. They're also saying high doses of aspirin. Interestingly, I don't see people using aspirin nowadays. In our years, for us, we grew up in the early 80s and 90s. Aspirin used to be the primary, I think, cure for malaria.
For malaria, yes.
And it had that terrible itching effect. Once the malaria goes, you go into a phase of terrible
the
itching.
whole night
you can't even sleep.
You can't sleep.
But they found a solution of either forcing you to sleep using Piriton or a painkiller to deceive you that there is no pain. So meaning, just drugs that you take can cause you to lose hearing. But in this case, the drug may just be influencing the brain's capacity, and it's a temporary thing. So it's not like it's going to cause permanent damage. It just degrades your hearing by affecting the way the brain is interpreting the signal. And after the drug is off, you essentially
regain your hearing.
Regain your hearing. Okay. The others are of course physical, like the eardrum is fractured, is damaged, has been ruptured, because remember, for it is a membrane, some kind of a simple membrane, so something can pierce it and cause it to have a problem. And remember that the hearing is done by very precise movements. Anything that causes any tiny damage to the eardrum will cause some impairment in the way you are hearing. And all those, they are saying here that the surgeons have been trained to restore. So human beings have been given a lot of knowledge by Allah. Imagine being able to repair eardrum.
Yes.
People even repair eyes. So it is a very interesting issue.
So as we wind up, the damage you've talked about, I want you to help us understand. We have these extreme cases, like somebody has an accident, and then you see their brain either has a serious effect, according to research, is there a correlation between either accident and deafness? And then second, there are also people who are subjected to torture. Somebody is taken and is subjected to physical torture, beatings here with the head, and there are cases where that can also bring about the
because like we have said, physical torture can cause physical damage to the ear system. Either someone has been slapped, because remember, if a person slaps you heavily, they cause an abnormal pressure within the ear, and you can, in that case, damage the eardrum just physically.
Physically, yes.
Then for the cases of accidents, either the heating has created the problem, or a mega sound was produced during the accident that caused the ear to be damaged, or the brain itself. Because remember, we said all these organs we are seeing on our head, they are simply data collectors. Once they collect the data, it has to go into the brain for interpretation. So should the segment within the brain that handles hearing have anything affecting it, you now end up being unable to hear. But with the ear system working fine, it is sending the data, but at the destination there's no interpretation part is not there. So in that case, you end up being unable to hear. And all these other problems that occur after stroke or etc., anything that causes the brain to lose some of its function can affect. And the organs appear not to be working, yet in actual sense the organs are working fine, but they are simply sending data to wrong locations.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we can not extend the discussion more than this. We just want to thank you as our guest for his preparing for us information, and we pray that Allah rewards you abundantly. Those the viewers, we also want to appreciate you so much. We hope that what we share here becomes the reason for you to appreciate things in a better way, appreciate things in a perspective that helps you understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a better way, so that you worship Him with that conviction and appreciation that Allah has control over you. And remember, He says, if you do not worship Him in the true sense, He has so many other creatures that do worship Him. So we hope through this you're trying to understand that Allah has so much that He has put for you as favor, as the blessing, the ears, the brain, plus the other things that we shall be looking at in the coming episodes. If you miss out on the episodes or on the show, kindly always visit the Salam TV YouTube page, type Alhidaayah, and then you can view the show. We'll encourage you to like it, share and comment in the comment section. You can always pick up the comments and then see how to come either and make an addition on whatever you would have said, or if it requires us to explain in a better way, we would still present the same to our guests when they come in. Otherwise, we appreciate so much the time you give in to watch that show. We want also to encourage you that as the first 10 days of the month of Dhul Hijjah are coming in, make that preparation that is needed for a person who deserves to be a better servant of Allah. Have you set aside that animal to slaughter, of course in the categories that are allowed in the Sharia? Have you planned on fasting? Are you planning on doing a sadaqah and many other things? Let's follow the teachings that are given to us by our scholars and see that we also go through this season as people who have earned a lot of rewards. Thank you very much for always being with us. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Eno ye Salam TV. Adhan ngekutuswako.
Hotel Africana. Come as a guest and leave as a friend.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة